And she said, so you're writing a book about animal grief. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, my granddaughter, she lost her cat several months ago and she's still not over it. And she said it a little judgy, and I'm like, well, maybe she doesn't know that there's anyone else but grieving that cat but her. Maybe have you asked her how she feels? Have you asked her what it is that she misses most about that cat? Have you tried? Because discussion is a really powerful therapy,
Yeah.
especially if family trusts each other enough to share that. But I felt bad because teenager or adult, whatever your age, if you don't feel like anyone shares that grief with you, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to try and process it yourself.
Have you ever had a dog, a cat, any beloved pet? How do you mourn them when they pass? Jean Alfieri is the author of 21 Ways to Weather the Loss of Your Pet, and she has a few ideas for mourning not just our pets, but all our habits and good times that pass with them. Come join the conversation and bring along a few of your favorite pet memories. Jean, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Hi, Pat. It is great to be here. Thank you. So, the story behind the story, if you will, is I am an author, a writer, and a dog fan. My husband and I have adopted senior dogs for going on a couple of decades now. We joke that although we pay the mortgage, it's really the dog's house. So, what I have today that are going to discuss is a new book, and it's titled 21 Ways to Weather the Loss of Your Pet. It's an idea guide for grieving and healing.
The loss of a pet. I think for most of us, that one hits really deeply.
Yes. And it's been, this idea has been kind of floating around for me, and I've avoided it, to be quite honest, for a number of years because it's sad. And it's very hard to come from a place that will engage people if you are writing it from a sad place. And so I really had to work on how am I going to present this, and how is it that I think I have something to offer? Not that I think I'm so unique, but having gone through this time and time again, with the vintage puppies, we call them in our house, because we like to adopt senior dogs, what do I have to offer that others could benefit from?
What do you have to offer?
Well, and so 21 Ways, it's kind of interesting because my husband looked at the title and went, do people need 21 ways? And I went, no, certainly not. But there might be a couple of things and some are going to resonate differently with you than others. I designed this having first met with the first idea that came for this book was I had met with a second grade class, and I was talking with them about my work at the Humane Society and volunteerism and the children's book collection that I have titled Zuggy the Rescue Pug. And the kids were really well prepared to pepper me with questions. What I didn't expect is a little boy who raised his hand and said, have you ever had a dog that died?
Hmm.
And my heart ached for him because I understood a bit of the pain that he was going through. And so we started a conversation. And of course, he wasn't the only one in the class that had experienced a loss like this. But in second grade, it's very pivotal because it may sometimes be the first experience with grief that a
Right.
child has had. And so I did not expect to start a second grade therapy that group that day, but the conversation went well. And I think just knowing you're not the only one
Yeah.
going through something like that is helpful. And that was where we were able to go with the class. And I say we because the teacher was very instrumental in this too. And I learned in talking with her afterwards that really his parents were struggling with this. She was struggling with it, the counselor. It really does take a village. And I think we lose sight of that as we get older and just think we should be able to handle things. I'll tell you, Pat, having gone through more than a dozen senior dogs, it's different every time. I'm a
Oh,
different
yeah.
person. It's a different dog. It is different. And so the ideas are really meant to meet you where you are, whether you're a parent helping a child. There's some easy ideas, there's some more advanced ideas for adults, like painting a wine glass. It's just a way of commemorating that animal.
I think it's important, and I think grief with an animal is very real. One of my guests, Christina Ramirez, had one of the best explanations of grief I think I've ever heard. She was talking about the grief of losing a spouse, but I think it applies to a beloved member of your family, an animal. And she said that at first grief is overwhelming. Imagine it as this huge circle, and it's your entire life. Nothing else exists. Over time, the rest of your life starts to grow a little. You get a little circle in there, and it grows, and proportionately, the grief shrinks to the point where your life is now the circle, and the grief is a smaller circle within it. But it never goes away. And I really love that explanation because I think it's fair to carry our love and our grief over time. I mean, we can't get mired in it indefinitely, but I think to ignore it dishonors whoever we're grieving.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that definition too. I love even the imagery of that because often we think of grief as a linear process, right? I'm going to be angry, then I'm going to deny it, then I'm going to feel depressed about it. Then at what point do you get to acceptance? And people think when they get to acceptance, then they're done. They're good. But that it doesn't work that way, right? It just continues. It depends. So for instance, we lost our Airedale Sally last November.
Mm.
I was heartbroken. And she wasn't even quote unquote my dog. She was my husband's dog. And yet she was my walking partner. She was, a good first sister to the rest of our 3 pack of dogs that she left behind. She was all these things. And you feel that when the presence is gone. It had been months later. It was late March. It was finally nice weather outside again. And we were going to go sit out on the porch. And when we go out front on the porch, we bring all the dog beds, and I didn't need to bring hers because she wasn't there. And it
Oh.
isn't like I hadn't thought of her since then, but this marked a time where we were trying something new, often similar to holidays, right? If you had the pet the previous holiday and now you're at the holiday time again and now they're not there, you're going to suffer it all over again. And we don't want to do that. Sometimes we just feel like we should pack that away. But it isn't linear. It does come in waves sometimes, depending on the memories that are brought back.
Oh, I had a cat. We had a mutual love affair for 18 years. I won't bore everybody right now with the details of it, but we adored each other. And when he died, I mean, to this day, I can cry thinking about him dying. However, one of the turning points for me was being grateful for the time we had together and focusing on the how much I learned from him and what a wonderful soul he was. And that helped me a lot in terms of turning that corner on grief.
Yes. And that is what this book is about. That's the instrumental part of what can I do to help myself get there. It really is just it's a tool to come alongside and give you a hand and say, hey, have you tried this? Have you talked about this? And for friends, we don't necessarily think of the population that's impacted by this too. I mean, you have veterans who have therapy dogs and assistant dogs. You have elderly people who this may be the last living member of the family under that roof. And they're going to struggle. And we don't think of it. Oh, the cat passed. No, no, it's not that simple. It could be very hard when you consider all the memories attached with that animal. And so really what's important, and again with children, is helping them through it and what will help them through it to not only be able to discuss it a little more, but just spend time in the moments that were so precious.
Does grieving an animal is it really any different than grieving the loss of a person or a relationship?
See, and that's a great question. I feel like all of it's different. In my studies and in my research to do this book, I became a certified grief coach specifically for pet loss. Who knew there was such a thing? And what was really interesting about it is it talks about the history of our connection with dogs, which dates back 10,000 years ago, cats, 9,000 years ago. They took a little longer to come around, and horses somewhere within that 9 and 10,000 year period. But when we talk about the relationship we have with them, what's interesting to consider is how society looks at that. It seems that society understands when your spouse dies, when a mother dies, a parent dies, something, the tragedy of that. But not everybody appreciates how deeply the sorrow may run when an animal dies. That's for two reasons, both of which I'm highly offended by. But the first one is it's just an animal. And the second one is you can get another. And anybody who has a pet knows It just isn't that simple and it isn't that easy. And yet, when you look at bereavement policies and people feeling guilty or embarrassed to take time off of work to grieve the loss of an animal, it just simply isn't part of our culture, which is really unfortunate because an animal certainly is worthy of our sorrow.
Well, and it may be a very significant relationship in that it may be the most unjudging,
Yes.
lovable relationship you ever have.
Yes. And especially in a family, they tend to be the favorite family member because they're the only one that everybody gets along with, right?
What are some of the things that you recommend in your book?
So there are simple ideas depending on what you enjoy doing. Many of them are art projects, some of
Hmm.
them are writing projects, and that's really where I started. One of the ideas that I offer that we do every time a dog dies is, and our house is full of dogs, but this will work whether it's a bunny, guinea pig, whatever your pet of preference is we at the dinner table that evening talk about our favorite memories. And what's so
Oh.
joyful about that is I think I have all the great memories, but then when I listen to my son and my husband and all the funny memories, we laugh, we cry, and it just feels like a really genuine way to honor that animal. After that, I prefer to keep, I want to keep those memories. And so I write them down, I journal. And that for me was therapy over the course of a couple of years when our first pug passed away. And so there are writing suggestions with Sally, the Airedale that just recently passed. I'd never done this before, but I wrote a eulogy. Eulogy means to give high praise, and we
Hmm.
do it for people, so why not do it for our pet? And it was actually how I announced her passing on Facebook because I couldn't bring myself to just make phone calls, and people knew that she was ill. And so that eulogy was what I put out to make the announcement. So there are writing projects. And like I said, some art projects too. There are some that are more simple for kids, like painting a rock. There are some more advanced, like the wine glass idea. And there's even some, there are times of day when you will miss that animal, possibly more because you feed them or you walk them. And I suggest lighting a candle, an electric candle, if you've got kids, a real candle, if you prefer, and just hold the space during that time to acknowledge that you miss them.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the most remarkable art projects I think I've ever run into in terms of healing. It had to do with illness, not with loss. But this particular project was run by a woman for cancer patients. And what she would do is she'd have them create a beautiful ceramic plate, hand paint it. I mean, just make this gorgeous plate. And they'd go into the oven, it would come out, and then they'd smash it.
Ooh,
And then they had to repurpose it into something beautiful.
wow. How interesting.
Isn't that that to this day that project sticks in my mind? I think it's just amazing to
Yeah,
as a metaphor for having to repurpose a shattered life in many ways.
right.
And I think grief takes a lot of different forms. And I think we need to really, really pay it heed, whether it comes from illness, animals, people. It's such a valid universal emotion. And I think you're right. We don't give people the space to grieve. And I don't think we're as sensitive as we could be to the loss of a pet.
I agree. And because of that, unfortunately, in our culture, we don't take advantage of any opportunity we may have. If it's going out in nature and feeling closer, if you took the animal for a particular walk or whatever it is you do for yourself, I don't think we consider what we might be able to do to help ourselves get through it because the expectation is just, okay, a month has passed, you should be done with it. I met a woman at an event a couple of months ago, and I told her I was working on this book. It was at that time, and she looked at me and kind of tilted her head, and I'm like, oh, something's working in there. And she said, so you're writing a book about animal grief? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, my granddaughter, she lost her cat several months ago and she's still not over it. And she said it a little judgy. And I'm like, well, maybe she doesn't know that there's anyone else but grieving that cat but her. Maybe have you asked her how she feels? Have you asked her what it is that she misses most about that cat? Have you tried? Because discussion is a really powerful therapy,
Yeah.
especially if family trusts each other enough to share that. but I felt bad because teenager or adult, whatever your age, if you don't feel like anyone shares that grief with you, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to try and process it yourself.
That's a really interesting point, and that goes back to actually what you said earlier, that when an animal is lost, everybody has their own stories.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Yes.
in a way, is grieving something a little bit different, aren't they?
A little bit different in a little different way. And I'll offer this for couples or families who are out there. When our first pug passed away, he was blind. So we had the house set. We didn't move the furniture. The shoes stayed by the door. It was all very clear and uncluttered for him to be able to make his way around. And the day after he passed, my husband and I went to the gym. We came home, and Josh moved toward the sink to get a drink of water and dropped his gym bag right in the middle of the floor. And I looked at him and I tisked. I went, "Oh, why would you do that?" And he turned around to me and I said, "Wyatt will trip right over that." And he came over and hugged me.
Oh,
Now, I knew the dog was gone and the dog wasn't going to be there, but it offended me on his behalf that so quickly, not 24 hours, would he be dropping his gym bag on the middle of the floor. He goes, "Is this how it's going to be?" I go, "I think this is how it's going to be." And he goes, "And his water dish and bowl?" I go, "We'll stay right where it's at." He said, "The toy box?" I said, "We'll stay right there." And what's interesting is my husband, like many people, would pick up everything. I have friends who are like, "I can't see it anymore. It has to go away." And that is what makes them feel better, is to have it tidied up. For me, I would have just been heartbroken to not see those things for just a little while longer. I just wanted to know and have some semblance of normalcy and just seeing those things still for a little while longer. So consider, when we say it's different for everybody, it's really different for everybody, and children may grieve very differently than their parents, and the parents themselves may grieve very differently too.
how do people show their grief?
So beyond the tears, right,
Mhm.
beyond the tears, there's sometimes anger. For animals, there's sometimes guilt and frustration if they had to make the choice of euthanasia, because that notches things up, and the anxiety and the stress around that even more, because people will say they feel like they're having to be God in making this decision, when truly you're making the best life choice for that animal given their condition. And so that makes it even more complicated, that you've got things on top of that. So in many ways, some will become very quiet, and secluded. It shows up in different ways. And so that's why it's, in order to process it, helpful to let people, and if there are people who will understand. It certainly doesn't make it better if you're surrounded by people who don't get it, because they're not going to be compassionate about it.
How does introducing another animal into the household impact things?
Oh, here we go. Right. So yes, how and when to do that is just so individual. And I, it's the usual, it depends. And my husband and I tend to be very different about that too. He wants to grieve the loss. I don't know for how long, because being the good wife that I am, I give him the nudge, I give him the elbow. And to me, if there's a space open, if there's a dog bowl open, we need to fill it. So for me, I want that caring and that ability to be able to love another animal. And so that's a tough question. That is a tough question, and it really depends on the person.
I think being able to love again is really important. And it's never the same, it's always different.
Right, right. And unfortunately, if you don't deal with the grief, our family dog passed away, and I asked my dad twice over the course of 5 years when, and I was out of the house at that time, when he'd get another dog, and all he could do was shake his head and get teary. And this is not a man who cried that I ever saw cry publicly. He could not get over the loss, and that complication of that, as deeply as he grieved that dog, not to allow him to get another one, just made my heart so sad, because I knew in my heart, having a love for animals, I couldn't let that happen, or it would just be misery. For me to be so sad that I couldn't get another pet would just be misery. And that's another reason why I try and reach out to people, because I saw it happen and I know that's very real. And to avoid that, if at all possible, not that you're ever going to be okay with their passing, I don't know that you ever get over it, quote
Yeah.
unquote, but to move along well enough to love another animal is just that's what life's about to me.
Yeah, and I think there's a psychological point where you can't dig yourself that deep a ditch. And it goes for any sort of loss, actually. You can
Yes.
continue to bring that grief forward and honor the life of whoever it is that you miss, dog, person, cat, whatever.
Yes.
Um, but you also have to reframe it or let it go because you have to continue your life. You can't dig yourself into this depression and not come out of it.
Right, right. You'll miss so much, and that's not what we're here for. We're not here to be depressed and sad. That isn't. And that isn't to say that there aren't experiences. And of course, we wouldn't appreciate the mountains if we didn't have the valleys.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said about that experience that you had to hold in your heart joyfully versus focusing on the final moments for that animal. That's not what they're here for. They're here to bring us joy and delight, and that's what they do.
If you could give people three hints for finding joy in a tough situation, what would you say to them?
I would say look for what makes you smile, right? What made you smile about that, about anything, about any given day? Where did you find that smile? Because that's your indicator. That's your indicator. And to be patient too, not to feel like you're obligated for it. Um, you can find joy in many small things. I think there's more joy in small things than there is in grand things. So and then to appreciate it, just appreciate what you have and what you could have and be hopeful for what you have going forward.